Welcome to the ACS Technical Advisory Board podcast series, where we talk all things tech including data, cyber, AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things. Meet your host, Dr. David Cook, Vice President of the Australian Computer Society's Technical Boards. David is a technology advocate dedicated to advances and progression of computing and human-computer interaction. In today's episode, David will be talking with ACS Cyber Security Committee member and IFIP TC11 Security and Privacy Protection in Information Processing Systems representative, Professor Paul Haskell-Dowland. Join us as we discuss emerging trends in security and privacy protection, global agreements on AI and data security, and the human aspects of security and privacy protection.
Today, I'm talking with Professor Paul Haskell-Dowland. Paul is a professor in the School of Science and is the discipline lead for computer science at Edith Cowan University. Paul is the TC11 chair for IFIP as the representative from Australia. Globally, he is also the worldwide chair for TC11, which is Security and Privacy Protection in Information Processing Systems. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you very much.
Let's start with the overall technical committee that you basically command in terms of where it's going. Are there any particular emerging issues that you think, trends if you like, through the information security and privacy protection sector?
So I think one of the big things that's come along, certainly in the last few years and has gained a significant amount of media attention, is AI. So we're seeing a lot of debate and discussion about the usefulness of artificial intelligence, the fact that it is now commonplace. We see it in tools, in products, featuring in websites. But there's that sort of uncertain dark side of AI. We're a little bit uncertain as to how it's going to be used. We are cautious of what is the future application of AI. And if we put our future vision hat on, you can start to think about some of the nefarious purposes of AI. But of course, AI is just a technology like any other. It can be used for good and bad. And what we've been seeing is an increasing level of interest in AI from an industry perspective, a significant amount of interest in it from the academic perspective. And as a technical committee, we are very interested in looking at the future directions for AI, providing input thought leadership into how countries, how organizations should be looking at mandating its use, providing governance matters, and recommendations on how to approach the safe use of not just AI in the term that we think about it, but the whole generation of machine learning that is beginning to appear pretty much everywhere that we look in the technology space. Perhaps another key area, of course, is that of the more sort of general cybersecurity. And over the last decade, we've seen a rise in the cases of cybersecurity incidents. And in particular, we've seen a significant increase in malicious activities when we think about the data breaches that we see on an almost daily basis. And part of the remit of TC11 is to help, first of all, discuss those matters and look at the protective mechanisms and the lessons that we should be learning, but also to be providing input, particularly into national policy debate and discussion, to try and help inform the next generation of legislation that might be impacting on cybersecurity and the use of IT and ICT systems, but also to look at how we can educate and uplift skill sets within the wider communities, both in terms of the population, but also in terms of industry and other organizations that might well be using these technologies.
So, Paul, thinking about the way in which we use AI, I guess you touched on the need to have proper rules. From a global perspective, do we have agreement? I mean, do different nations agree in how we should be using AI? From a security perspective, I'm interested to know, is it thematically something which is of conflict and debate, or do we all see eye to eye?
I think there's a very different approach around the world to AI. There are certainly countries who are significantly embracing it and looking towards it as an opportunity, something to be used in day-to-day life within industry, within government, within academia. There are certainly countries for whom AI is seen as a threat, and so there is a pushback against the use of AI. And perhaps the majority is sitting, as you would probably expect, in the middle, seeing a great deal of opportunity, but also being cognizant of the various threats that the technology might expose. And in particular, thinking about some of the adversarial attacks that could occur against AI, or indeed AI being used by, for example, criminals to improve their capabilities. So I think at this stage, it's very embryonic. We are still emerging in the era of AI. ChatGPT is the best example, continues to evolve and develop. So AI as a technology is something that I think is inevitable and we have to embrace. But there are many countries that simply cannot agree on how this should be taken forward. And there are many calls for legislation and for international agreement in this space. But I think at the very moment, it's just too early in that piece to have any kind of global, even national agreement in terms of how we should be using, embracing, and being cautious with the use of AI. I think a lot to come in the coming years.
So, Paul, within the TC11 technical committee, there's quite a number of different working groups, and I wanted to touch on some of the ones that you're involved with specifically. So one of the ones is 11.1, which is Information Security Management. You've been associated with that working group for some time now. Could you tell us a little bit about that association and what the vision is for that particular working group?
So 11.1, as you can probably guess from the number system, is one of the earliest working groups within TC11 and is very much focused on information security management, which is really where information security started. That and concepts like data security or network security, going way back many years. And my association with that goes back over 20 years. All the way back to being a PhD student. So I actually started at the University of Plymouth as a PhD student under Professor Stephen Fennell, Dr. Fennell at the time. And he introduced me to IFIP. And in fact, one of my earliest conferences was an IFIP conference. I think it was the World Computer Congress, which happened in Beijing, I think in 2000. So all that way back, I've had some kind of connection and involvement with IFIP. And it was really quite revealing to go along, firstly, to a SEC conference, the IFIP SEC annual conference, which covers all of the working groups, and to see the breadth and scale of activity that went on, the representation from around the world, meeting researchers, industry professionals, government representatives, who were working collaboratively together to address issues of information security. And at the SEC level, IFIP SEC, that would cover all of the 14 working groups. So we didn't actually have 14 at that time, but all of the areas were given really equal footing at the SEC conference. And when I began to look at what IFIP was doing as a whole, we saw that there was a wide variety of focus areas through the technical committees and the 100+ working groups who are exploring different areas. And I very much wanted to be a part of that. So I started to look at the information security management domain, which strongly aligned with my own PhD at the time. And it really introduced me to a number of people that would play both a pivotal role in terms of my own professional experience, so exploring the PhD and my subsequent employment as an academic, but to also look at the opportunities to collaborate on projects, to partner with people, to write papers together with individuals who I probably would have never experienced through any other channel. And information security management has evolved and grown over those 20 years. The remit remains fundamentally the same, to look at issues relating to information security management. How do we look after the information systems, the data that we collect in vast volumes? And I would probably argue that the relevance and importance of ISM today is very much stronger than it was 20 years ago. When we look at some of the issues to do with data breaches, when we look at the volumes of data being collected by organizations, by the multinational corporations who collect data through their various entities and then harvest it at a central level, with billions of entries of personal data being collected, the concepts of information security and privacy are stronger now than they ever have been. So I think there's an incredible future for information security management, but indeed all of the working groups within TC11, as we really aim to build a stronger and more secure society, looking towards the next 60 years of IFIP, having recently celebrated the 60th anniversary.
So, Paul, thinking about the way IFIP works, and I really like the way that IFIP is a very organic instrument in terms of the fact that it features people from academia, and it features people from industry, and it features people from government, and it kind of plays between all of those three things. If I was to look at information security management from an Australian perspective, which of those three areas is the area of greatest need? Is it in academia? Is it in industry? Or is it in government and the way things are managed?
So I'd love to be able to give you an answer that was definitively one of those, because it would make life so much easier if we could just focus on one thing. But the reality is that all three are equally important to the different stakeholders. So if you're an individual, a member of the public, then the safety and security of your data, of the systems that you use, and of the people who hold your data and the information that they extract from it. Obviously, security is going to be a critical thing for you as an individual. And if you are responsible for IT security, for data management in an organization, then data security is absolutely critical to you and your role. And if we then extend that out into government, again, there would be no argument from anyone in government that we shouldn't be taking data security and information security absolutely seriously. And I think it's really the partnership between those three areas that we need to be focusing on. There's so much more that each of those entities, whether it be industry, government, academia, could be collaborating on to improve cybersecurity and information security generally. There's a significant lack of collaboration going on. We hear about policy being proposed, we hear about organizations implementing security, but they're often in isolation. And as a nation within Australia, but globally, we have an enormous wealth of knowledge and expertise and experience that can be brought to bear on these big problems, the wicked problems of security. And this is the area where IFIP is very much able to contribute by identifying talent wherever that may lie, by connecting people, organizations, governments, industry all together to be able to solve these big problems. Because you can guarantee the cyber criminals who sit behind many of the attacks are suitably motivated. They want to see the challenges bypassed using their attack techniques, using their capabilities, and they are prepared to invest and they are prepared to collaborate in order to be successful in what they do. We really have no choice other than to work collaboratively together. So it's not about any individual. It's not about an individual government. It's not about a particular organization. It's about tackling a societal problem, because if we get it wrong, if the bad guys win, then we lose everything, because everything is connected to technology and data.
Let's switch from management to humans because they're definitely different. And I want to talk about your involvement with Working Group 11.12, Human Aspects of Information Security and Assurance. Could you give me some indication of the key themes that are emerging in that particular working group? What are the really important ones, the ones that are absolutely critical across the globe, and what you think is the future of how we're going to deal with the human aspects in information security?
So human aspects of security is a really interesting area because it's the one area that often gets overlooked. So when we think about cybersecurity, when you think about the media portrayal of cyber, it's very much the hoodie-wearing hacker sitting in the corner of a room, usually in a darkened room, huddled over a keyboard typing away. The stereotypical image of cybersecurity is that of a criminal. And if we then extrapolate that out to think about what do people think about their responsibilities, they often push that away to other organizations, maybe other individuals, but certainly not themselves. And that's true whether you're an individual or indeed if you work in an organization where there should be a level of collective responsibility. Individuals rarely take responsibility for cybersecurity. So the human aspects of cyber is a really important area because, as I mentioned previously, it is absolutely critical that we tackle this collaboratively. we can't do this on an individual basis. It has to be people working together. So the human aspects of security is looking about how do we enable individuals to be more secure. And we see this a lot in organizations where security training approaches are beginning to focus now on training the individual not to be more secure in their organization, but to be a more secure individual, to be able to act responsibly, to take that responsibility for protecting themselves and being more aware. And one of the key areas that we've struggled with is addressing the area of security awareness. Everybody knows about cyber. Everyone knows that there are problems, but very few people take action. And probably the best example of that is password practice. How many people listening to this podcast are sitting in a situation where they have tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of passwords on different systems, but a large proportion of them are the same? And we know from all the data breaches that once the data becomes available, goes out on the dark web, it gets reused and reused time and time again by the cyber criminals. So if you've got common credentials, they're going to get reused on multiple systems. And yet that practice doesn't change. Individuals still do exactly the same thing as they've been doing for a decade. They choose a password they can remember and they reuse it time and time again. So clearly the educational approaches that we've been using for the last decade haven't been working. Telling people what the correct way to do it doesn't seem to change behavior. So we need to look at the approaches to training the individual in the context of organizational security and national security. So HISA, as it's been acronym to, is really looking at that human factor, both from a organizational perspective. What can we do inside an organization to improve cybersecurity posture by educating and uplifting the skills of the individuals, but also from a societal perspective. And as I've iterated previously, the real power behind IFIP is bringing together those stakeholders to try and make a difference at that national and international level.
Paul Haskell-Dowland, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
To find out more about how the ACS is powering Australia's technology brilliance, visit us at our website, Facebook or LinkedIn. Want to get involved with the ACS technical boards? Email us at tab@acs.org.au and tell us a bit about yourself. Join us for more thought leadership, ideas and information through our other podcasts on the ACS YouTube, Facebook or on LinkedIn.